Moral recognition therapy, or MRT, is a cognitive behavioral framework engineered to dismantle criminal thinking and treat externalized harm. The typical participant in this program is mandated by a court. They bring a history of addiction, incarceration, and verifiable destruction, actions that visibly broke trust and violated laws. But this specific document is an anomaly. This is a Step 5 injury worksheet, completed voluntarily by a retired professional and peer facilitator. His background contains no criminal history. It is rooted entirely in early attachment trauma. In a standard MRT workbook, we expect to find lists of thefts, deceptions, and substance abuse. None of that data appears here. Instead, the handwriting on these pages maps an unconscious, highly evolved survival mechanism, what clinical psychology categorizes as a deactivating attachment strategy. By examining this raw artifact, we can trace exactly how high avoidance trauma operates. We can also see how assigning standard recovery exercises to this specific profile creates a dangerous psychological bypass. A clinical framework is only useful if the practitioner realizes when a patient's trauma is actively outsmarting the curriculum. Look at the left page's two lists. The worst moments are encoded from the inside out, marked with precise dates: mother's death at 9, self-erasure at 16. The best moments lack internal texture. They are broad, institutional categories held at a distance: adoption, graduation, marriage. This asymmetry reveals how the system processes safety versus threat. Joy and stability are kept at arm's length, while grief and loss are fully, deeply inhabited. Look closer. A secondary pattern emerges. Almost every entry across both lists represents a specific person: a mother, a father, a child, rather than an abstract event. This is relational indexing. The participant's nervous system files every major life experience entirely through the presence or the rupture of attachment figures. Because every high and low is tied directly to human bonds, this individual constructed a highly specialized protective operating system to survive connection. The origin of that operating system is explicitly documented here, at item number 2 on the worst list: self-erasure at 16. Every other injury on the page is an external event that happened to the participant. This is the only entry phrased as an active choice. They erase themselves to survive. Moving to the circle of relationships on the right page, we see how that early dissociative strategy evolved into a permanent architecture. The prompt asks the participant to name their biggest relationship problem. They drew a self-portrait. It is a solitary figure wrapped in a robe and armor labeled isolate. The distinction between psychological walls and psychological armor is precise. Walls keep everyone out. Armor provides protected mobility. It allows the individual to engage in a relationship and remain physically present, while keeping the vulnerable self entirely shielded from exposure. Now look at the exact center of the circle. The hands are folded. In polyvagal theory, this posture represents non-extension, correlating directly with a dorsal vagal state of shutdown or partial freeze. The system is not aggressively pushing people away, but it is not reaching toward them either. It remains engaged, useful, and completely non-reaching. These sketches perfectly map a highly functional deactivating strategy. The participant stands close enough to matter to others, but never close enough for their own needs to be exposed. Step 5 of MRT operates on a strict structural assumption. Harm is a concrete, externalized action committed against someone else. The curriculum expects the patient to take accountability for acts of theft, violence, or physical abandonment. The trauma response documented in this artifact is built entirely on omission. Omission is relational absence inside physical presence. It is the quiet, active withholding of emotional vulnerability. Look at the diagnostic prompt. How have you damaged the relationship? When you ask someone whose primary defense is emotional absence to list the physical damage they've caused, they draw a blank. The tool allows a highly avoidant person to intellectualize their answers and safely bypass their actual relational deficits. When clinical frameworks designed for commission are rigidly applied to omission-based trauma, they do not treat the injury, they validate the patient's evasion. This creates a severe problem as the participant moves to step 6, which mandates helping others. The standard clinical logic assumes that mandated pro-social behavior forces externalized offenders to build empathy and construct a new outward-facing identity. Watch what happens when we map that prescription onto an established, armored operating system. The pro-social input is absorbed directly into the defense mechanism. For this specific high-avoidance profile, helping others is the armor. Facilitating groups, bearing witness to pain, and being relentlessly useful are the native modes this individual relies on to avoid being truly seen. Executing Step 6 perfectly requires zero emotional risk. It teaches them nothing new, reinforcing their isolation under the banner of clinical compliance. Prescribing uncalibrated pro-social behavior to a high-avoidance profile creates a pro-social bypass. It cements the trauma in place while generating the illusion of clinical success. True integration for this patient requires the exact opposite. They must build the capacity to tolerate an unguarded reach and learn how to receive. It requires dropping the armor and articulating a personal need, rather than safely adding value to someone else's life. The rigid, prescriptive steps of this curriculum are misaligned for attachment trauma, yet the tool retains a strange utility. Its value doesn't lie in the intended curriculum, but in its ability to force the patient to generate raw, high-signal data on the page. Standardized tools must be paired with precise clinical translation. Without it, we end up treating the worksheet rather than the wound.